Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
CNC Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, CNC provides patient-centered care for your entire family. CNC Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams as we do each and every week. Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, all on our docket today. And to break it down, one of the best we have, not just in the city, in the state, Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Times-Picayune, also a contributor to Fox 8 Sports and accomplished author. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Jeff, good to have you. Before we get started, a couple things. First of all, tell us a little bit about the book. How's it going? How folks can get it, especially with the holiday season coming up.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. The book, of course, he's talking about is Steve Gleason's memoir, A Life Impossible. We collaborated on that book for the last 2.5 years, and it was released in April, and it's just doing terrific. A lot of really great reviews of the book, critically acclaimed, I guess is the best way to describe it. And if you know Steve Gleason's story, I still encourage you to read it because there's a lot in there you're not going to know about his life. And I think the most interesting thing in the actual narrative is the fact that Steve and Michelle, his amazing wife, were willing to be so candid and transparent with the struggles that come with having an ALS diagnosis. It's not a sad story at all. There's going to be great uplifting moments in there, but I think in general, it's just a great life lesson of how you encounter adversity in your life and get to the other side of it.
Any future book signings that you're going to be having?
We're hoping to have some later on. We haven't committed to any close to the holidays, but I will be announcing on my social media sites also an opportunity if you can't get to a book signing just to get access to some signed books from Steve and myself so we can get them directly to you. So just look for those on my Twitter site at Jeff Duncan _.
And if folks just want to get a book and they're not worried about, again, having a signed copy, how can they do that?
Oh, they're all in every local bookstore here, or you can get it online at Amazon.com right now. Still in hardcover edition right now.
Right, NOLA.com, Times-Picayune, also, again, contributor to Fox 8 as well.
Yep, yeah, staying busy.
Yep, no doubt. All right, let's get started. Saints, again, 2017 winners over the Falcons. Again, they break the 7-game losing streak, first win since week 2. Darren Rizzi comes in and changes some things up. I mentioned this on the radio show this week that, and I've been around the Saints 67, right? Seen a lot of interim coaches coming in. Haven't seen, again, the situation in my memory that a coach comes in and changes things much like he did. Normally it's status quo, just trying to keep it together, trying to get to the end of the season. He came in obviously again with a lot of energy, and of course it looks like, again, they may seem like minuscule changes, but again it seemed to be able to work with the team. Talk a bit about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good observation, and I think there is one caveat that makes it a little different is that in a way Dennis Allen was just an extension of the Sean Payton regime. And if you think about that, Eric, that's the longest regime we've seen here in the history of the franchise, right? Yeah. Essentially 2 decades, where, as Darren Rizzi said, we've been doing things the same way around here for a long time. So I think there was a need to maybe shake some things up, to mix some things up, and to create change. He even quoted his mentor, Bill Parcells, who said, if something's going to change, something's got to change. I think it's a great mantra to follow going into that week of changing the locker room around. Some of these things were aesthetic changes. He flipped the ends of the field that the offense and defense worked on. But there was also some, I think, very tangible changes to the coaching staff that a normal interim head coach would not do. That's a very difficult thing to do. He demoted Todd Grantham. Todd Grantham is a veteran defensive line coach, well respected in both the college and NFL ranks. Basically demoted him and promoted Brian Young there. And you saw instant results. The defensive line probably played their best game of the year. So I think he showed a lot of qualities that make him a very intriguing potential head coach candidate, maybe not in New Orleans. I mean, maybe not just in New Orleans, but around the NFL. There's a reason he's interviewed for head coaching jobs.
A lot of people feel that, again, that if there was anyone on this coaching staff that could come in and maybe make a difference, it was Darren Rizzi, and a lot of that had to do again with his energy, but also again being a special teams coach as well. Your take on that, because again, we've seen other coordinators take over again, but this time it's the special teams coordinator.
Yeah, so like Rick Venturi, for instance, was an interim coach a couple of times in his career, but he was basically a linebackers position coach. He's been a defensive coordinator, so he worked with just a few players on the team, the defensive side of the ball in particular, whereas Darren Rizzi's worked with almost everyone on the roster, at least 75% of the roster, because players that don't start typically end up on the special teams. So he has a relationship with numerous players on both sides of the ball. So I think he feels comfortable going into those meeting rooms because he's been involved with the players. I think that's a unique situation. That's why you see a lot of special teams coaches. I think Joe Judge did an interim coaching job as well. You see that happen, whereas if they would have promoted, say, Clint Kubiak, he would have no contact with the defensive players at all. And I also think the fact that Darren Rizzi's been here a while, so he does understand some of the things. And I think it's important to note this. Not everything was broken. There's still a lot of good things in that building, a lot of good things about the process and the formula to winning that the Saints want to keep. And he's familiar with that from his days with Sean Payton.
Let's talk about that formula for winning, and we'll get back to the Falcons and Saints in a moment. Let's talk about what happened with Dennis Allen, the situation that was going on behind the scenes, what's been reported so far. There was maybe a little bit of a split between Mickey Loomis and Mrs. Benson. Mrs. Benson felt after speaking to the team that, at least that's been reported, that again, it was time to make a change. Dennis Allen maybe wanted to give Dennis Allen a little bit more time because of the injuries. Could you take us in maybe kind of that back room, what was going on there? Do you have information on that?
Well, I think it's all been reported. I mean, basically, it's the first time I can recall since I've covered the team where we've seen a little bit of a division between management and ownership. Usually it's very much lockstep and aligned and very collaborative in the decision-making process. And I don't think it's ever come out overtly where you've heard Gail Benson or Mickey Loomis say this, but from talking to people in the building, yes, this was definitely something that had been brewing behind the scenes for a few weeks. I've been told that Gail Benson wanted to make a move earlier than the Panthers game, actually after the Broncos game, that she was interested in making a change then. Mickey Loomis talked her out of it. Mickey Loomis very loyal, obviously, to Dennis Allen. He hired Dennis Allen. He wants to see him succeed, and by nature, Mickey Loomis is a very patient guy and wanted to be supportive, and I think give him more time. He got a couple more weeks, but I had been told a few days before the Panthers game by some good sources that if he lost that game, he was in serious trouble. Someone else told me he was definitely out if he lost that game. That's why it wasn't a big surprise. When he lost that game, I think everyone kind of knew. And I also think that led to some of the reaction you saw from the players, which was very unique. You don't see players either one with veiled comments about how things were going or openly kind of mocking the situation. I think they knew, they had gotten word, it's a small town. And I think they'd gotten word that he was in trouble, and so I think the dam kind of broke on a lot of frustration that had been building up over the last 7 weeks.
In your opinion, is this the final move with this organization in terms of changes? Will we see changes at the top of the organization? Will we see changes in the front office? Obviously, again, there may be changes in the coaching staff depending on what Rizzi does by the end of the season. But will the changes that we see go higher than Dennis Allen?
Well, I think it's too early to say. I mean, I don't think they've made any of those decisions yet. That's usually typically what they do after the season. They'll sit down and as a brain trust between Gail Benson, Dennis Lauscher, the president, Mickey Loomis, probably involve interim head coach Darren Rizzi, and also Jeff Ireland and Kai Harley are part of that brain trust along with Michael Parrington. So that'll be a decision made further down the road. And I think a lot will depend on how they finish the season, how Darren Rizzi and this team, if they're successful in winning games, I think he's going to have a real shot at leading this organization going forward. But I think it's just so early right now. I think it's way too early to say. Now, I would say we all know historically this is an organization that's kind of resistant to change.
Right.
They value stability. They value continuity. They sort of modeled themselves after the Pittsburgh Steelers, which has only had 3 head coaches. That's how they view themselves compared to, say, their peers in Carolina, which we've seen a lot of turnover. So if fans out there are begging for more changes, I think they may be disappointed just because of the way historically this team is operated.
And again, it begs the question with, again, the situation we're seeing with the roster right now, especially the bottom half of this roster with, again, the issues we've seen in the draft. Obviously, again, the cap manipulation. We can go through the things that maybe have held this franchise back over the last few years. And then there's the situation, again, of loyalty. And then again, the intertwining of, again, not just the team, but again, what happens if Mrs. Benson dies with the individuals that are involved in this, Lauscher, Loomis, with the trust, and I believe Mr. Bensel as well, that are all involved in the trust as well. So again, if a move was to be made, it might be a little bit more difficult than just saying we're going to move off from a general manager, move off from someone that's involved in the front office, because there are things obviously that happen that could happen again if and when Mrs. Benson passes.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think that's going to
well,
affect
I think
this?
what's important to know is that Mickey Loomis is embedded in the hierarchy of the organization.
Right.
Much deeper than most general managers. It's a very unique situation.
It is.
So he's not the typical general manager in that way, but I know I've heard a lot of people speculate, he could move into maybe a emeritus position or a director of football operations, overseeing things like that. Those decisions would be decided down the road. Mickey Loomis is the longest tenured general manager in the league. It's really not even close. So there is, I think, probably reason to speculate that because he has been in that position for a long time. But I also know Mickey is very much committed to ending on a good note. And I don't think right now would be in any way a good note. And I think, like a lot of people, like we saw Drew Brees wanting to keep coming back at the end of his career to try and get that one elusive Super Bowl and have the Peyton Manning type walk-off. I think there's some of that in Mickey Loomis, in that he doesn't want to walk away in any way from his career the way things are going right now.
Okay. Let's talk about the interim bump that Darren Rizzi got, and do you think that's sustainable with this team, considering, again, he seems to have the attention of the team, and they played for him this past week. Is that sustainable?
Yeah, look, I mean, we see it happen a lot in the league. They call it the interim head coach bump for a reason, right? It's not just in New Orleans. I think we saw it last year with the Raiders and Antonio Pierce. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day in Kansas City. And we've seen that's been a struggle to maintain that. So I think that is going to be a challenge going forward. Eventually the emotion wears off, and then it comes down to X's and O's and execution. And we saw even in the second half of the game, it kind of stagnated a little bit. But I think the schedule does set up. I mean, they're not playing the Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens. They're playing very beatable teams. And I think there is a little bit of a hunger right now in the locker room after that long period of losing. There's some motivation now to kind of get things right. The problem is, of course, is you're missing still a lot of cornerbacks and receivers, very key playmaking positions that might be difficult to overcome. But I have no doubt he's wired that way. If you've been around Darren Rizzi, he's a high energy, enthusiastic guy by nature. That's one of the reasons why I think they selected him to be the interim head coach. They needed that. He's different personality-wise than Dennis Allen in so many ways. And I think the team certainly responded to that first off. And look, if they win a game, and certainly the Cleveland Browns are a winnable opponent, then you start building some confidence, and you're getting some players back. Eric McCoy's going to be back this week. Then you can kind of start building on something.
Obviously, it was a fractured locker room. Do you believe that, again, this locker room can come back together again? And look, nobody's expecting them to make a run at this point, but again, start stacking some wins.
Yeah, look, I think it can happen. I think part of the problem the Saints had, I think personally a lot of players really liked Dennis Allen and respected him, but I think at some point, you know, it's a results-driven business. They want to win, especially some of the older players who are at the end of their careers and know there's not, you know, the clock's ticking. They only have so many years left. So there's a frustration level built up there, and you keep hearing the same phrase, these veiled phrases of like accountability, right? Now that was very much what we heard at the end of last season.
Yes.
So that's what was so disappointing to me to hear, was this was supposed to be taken care of in the offseason.
Right.
With the new offensive staff, we kept hearing this new staff was going to hold the offense accountable, and then we're hearing the same problems again. So to me, that's what led to his ouster, was that it didn't get fixed in the offseason. And I think we saw that manifest itself, that a lack of attention to detail, you know, just the small things that kept cropping up. And I've wrote this a number of times, Eric, you know, it wasn't one thing. I mean, we tend, as fans and media, as observers of the game, we tend to reduce it down to finding a scapegoat or finding one thing. And last year it was Pete Carmichael. He became the lightning rod.
Yes.
The scheme was old, right? We heard all that. And now they brought in, you know, Clint Kubiak and this new scheme, and you see that it was way bigger than that. There's way bigger problems in that organization, and I think there still are. And they've got to get those things addressed if they want to be competitive like they were under the Payton regime.
The scheme on both sides of the ball seemed to be much more aggressive last week. Again, we found stuff starting to see the deep pass once again on the offense. We saw a defense that was swarming, that was flying around. Do you anticipate that continuing through the rest of the season?
Well, I think there was a little bit of a circumstantial factors involved. Atlanta has the worst pass rush in the league.
True.
They have no pass rush, so there's plenty of time for Derek Carr to find Marquez Valdez-Scantling downfield. Is he going to have that time every week? I don't know. Right. But I think the running game now has a chance to really start taking off again, like we saw earlier in the season. You get Eric McCoy back. You basically have your offensive line intact. You still got Kamara and Taysom Hill. That's going to be the foundation of this offense. That's how they wanted to set it up. And then you set up the play-action game deep. So I think that's the formula. The problem is they're just so banged up at receiver right now. I don't think we're going to see that type of explosive game every week from MVS. He's had games like that in his career, and then he's disappeared. So I think that's the challenge, is how can they manufacture a passing game when they have to have it? When the running game doesn't get you what you need on first and second down, and you've got to get that third down play. There's really not a receiver there as a go-to guy. They're going to have to lean on the tight ends. And look, that's going to work against the Cleveland Browns that have scored more than 20 points one time all year. Yeah. I mean, they're very limited offensively. But when they get against these, you know, more elite teams in the league, I think they're going to struggle.
I will give a credit to the pro personnel department, again, going out and getting an MVS, getting a McGovern off a practice squad. I mean, these are guys that came in and really, again, especially for a guy like McGovern, who, again, was just, I believe he's going to be pulling back on the practice squad. They let him go in, and, of course, bringing it back with McCoy coming back, was really able to kind of triage that offensive line. And then now you look at MVS, what he's done for the wide receiving corps. It's only one game, but again, he is a deep threat. So I give a lot of credit there, because it's hard to find those guys toward the end of the season, especially with the rash of injuries we've seen with this team. Yeah,
and I think MVS brings a certain skill set that they were really missing once Shaheed went down, the ability to get behind the defense. We saw that against the Falcons. And I don't want to downplay all that because it was big, but I mean, the Falcons defense is pretty bad. I mean, I think they're going to be challenged in different ways coming forward. You know, and look, that game, in spite of everything, all the good vibes we saw out of it, they still needed 3 missed field goals to kind of hang on and win.
I got some missed field goals.
That's what I'm saying. For a guy that's one of the best in the league. So, you know, I think the schedule sets up well, but it's hard for me to get too excited just because, you know, I see the limitations in this team. When you start looking at the really good teams in this league, Detroit, you know, Baltimore, the teams we talked about, I just don't think the Saints are in that number.
Right. Well, again, which is one of the reasons why I want to ask you about the possible organizational changes down the line here, because of the drop-off in talent that we've seen over the last few years. Let's talk about the Lattimore trade. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, it was a long time coming. I think everybody knows they were trying to trade him in the offseason. They didn't like the offers they got then, and I think it worked out really well holding on to him and not jumping the gun to trade him in the offseason when they didn't have the same compensation. And they really took advantage of a Washington team that all of a sudden sees itself as a contender and is a corner away from maybe being able to make a playoff run. So it worked out, I think, well for Washington. They get a lead corner in Lattimore and can now make a playoff run. And I think the Saints got tremendous compensation for a guy that, you know, is probably going to demand another contract, and I don't think the Saints are in position to pay that. And they're fairly deep. I know this season's kind of a wash now. But they're fairly deep. They drafted WLAE-TV with this very thought in mind that eventually they would move on from Lattimore. But it is the end of an era. He was the best cornerback in franchise history, a multi-time Pro Bowler. He'd not played at that level the last few years. Very inconsistent, I think, injury prone. And look, he did not, let's be clear, he did not get along with Dennis Allen. He didn't get along with very many people. You know, he didn't get along with Marcus Robertson, the secondary coach. He's a very hard guy to connect with. And I think it speaks volumes that as good a player as he was all those years, he was never really voted team captain. He was not a leader on the team. He was kind of his own independent contractor. Tremendous talent. But I think when you're trying to build a team and you have all these young DBs with a lot of promise, Paulson Adebo, Alante Taylor, you know, WLAE-TV, you want leadership from that position. Invariably, when you give a guy a second contract, they almost inherit a leadership role. That's just isn't who Marshawn Lattimore is. And I think they also looked at that as a factor in the trade, as, you know, that influence he was having on the younger corners.
So many people wrote Alvin Kamara off this season as, again, over the hill, couldn't get it done anymore. And, of course, that is so far from the truth of what we've seen on the field. And, of course, again, one of the things that Rizzi does is name him captain. Your thoughts on how Alvin has played, and, of course, as a lot of people believe, long overdue that now he's a captain of this team. Yeah,
and that's another example. I mean, he'd never been voted team captain by his teammates. So the teammates are the one voting.
Yes,
it's not me and you.
That's right.
It's his teammates. So that says something a little bit, but I think Alvin Kamara has turned the corner a little bit here with the organization. I think it was touch and go whether he was going to have a future here, and I think once he got that contract extension, I think he's been on board. I think he's shown a little more leadership in terms of speaking out. He's never been one to really speak out, and I think he's felt more confident doing that. And he's certainly played at a much higher level. He still hasn't broken the long runs. I think his longest run's 20 yards, and that's something that I think they desperately need. Is a home run hitter, and Kendre Miller was supposed to be that, and that's another story. But he's supplied the offense. He's been the workhorse, not only in the running game, but as a receiver, and he's turning those 4- and 5-yard gains into 12, 13-yard gains. It's hard to do in the NFL. His level of balance and vision is rare. And I think right now it's exactly what this offense is. One consistent thing this offense has had all year.
Little bit of maybe a different type of question here. Both organizations, Pelicans and Saints, tremendous amount of injuries, soft tissue injuries. We again, Rizzi has instituted an activation period. We saw the Pelicans change over their medical staff. The Pelicans are in a situation now where, I mean, again, much like the Saints were, it's hard to field a team that again, that can win week in, week out right now. What are you hearing out of the organization about what's going on there, what they're trying to do to be able to solve those issues that not just, again, one team, both teams?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a correlation between the two. It's two separate teams, two separate, you know, medical staffs. I think a little bit you're playing whack-a-mole here. I mean, this hasn't been a problem in the past. Last year, the Saints didn't have any. I mean, they were one of the lowest in the league with soft tissue injuries. They were doing the same thing they did last year. So I think some of it's bad luck. I know they're trying to change things up, but I really think sometimes it's just circumstances and bad luck. And I also think one thing that you have to consider is some of this starts to happen when you're losing. I mean, it's just the way it is. Look around the league. You know, when you start getting into messy situations, very discouraging situations, these injuries start cropping up. So I think there's some of that in play as well. But I don't think there's anything.
On both clubs? In your opinion?
No question in my mind.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an easy way also from the front office to distract. You know, let's put out a long injury report, show how banged up we are, get a little sympathy. That goes on all the time. It's a way to distract from what's going on in the field, and I think it's employed often when things are going bad.
I think it's a great point because, again, soft tissue injury is a little different than, again, obviously, again, a knee injury or something like that. If a guy wants to kind of lay on his team's leg, they can do that.
Classic NBA back spasms.
Right.
So you've seen it for decades.
Yep.
You know, possible to see on an MRI, very difficult to argue against. And we used to call it the French Quarter flu.
There you go.
You know,
don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Can Rizzi get this team on a little bit of a run here, in your opinion? We know the schedule is favorable. They're getting healthy. He seems to have command of the locker room, at least for a week here. Is this something that could be sustainable, you think? I mean, I'm not saying this team's going to go on a run and go into the playoffs, but again, maybe right-sides this thing a little bit.
Well, it depends on how you define run. I mean, like, I definitely think they're going to beat Cleveland this week. I think that's goes without saying. I think these 50-50 games coming up, I think New York will be a difficult game on the road. I don't see them beating Green Bay in Green Bay. They've also got a difficult game against the Rams. So, yeah, look, I think if he gets 4 wins out of this team the rest of the way, that's going to be enough, I think, to merit him strong consideration. He's not going to be a very expensive price tag, which I think is important for this organization, where they're at right now. I don't see them going out. I could be completely wrong. I don't have any intel on this at all. I'd be shocked if they're in the market for a big name hire like a Bill Belichick or a Mike Vrabel. I'll be surprised if they go big
maybe
game
a Ben
hunting.
Johnson type?
He's going to be big game.
But he's going to be big, right?
Very expensive.
Very expensive.
I don't think they're going to be in that market. I'd be surprised if they are. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it could be wrong. But I think Darren Rizzi has a lot of the qualities. This organization likes familiarity. They know what they're getting with Darren Rizzi.
But that's a double-edged sword, though, right?
No, it definitely is, but that's how they operate.
Right.
You know, we've seen it happen in the past. Maybe they want to turn the page on the entire Sean Payton era, and Darren Rizzi's a part of that. So maybe they do not want to continue that continuity. Maybe they want to go in a different direction. I think that's where we'd like to hear from Mickey Loomis, and he hasn't spoken publicly about this.
Are you surprised by that? I mean, he's been on his radio show, but he never met the media. You know, they sent Tyrann Mathieu and Foster Moreau, who did it. Both guys did an incredible job. Okay, they really did. And actually, that was really a smart move on their part because you got 2 native New Orleanians coming out. They know the passion of the city, know the heartbeat of the city. Heck, they've lived with the Saints their entire lives. They understand what the losing has meant to this season. Not just this season, not just to the fans, but to the economy as well. So, but I thought that was a great move. But again, I think that most cases you hear the general manager come out and address these issues, and he has not done it.
Yeah, I know in New York, when the Jets made the change with Robert Saleh, the owner spoke.
Right.
So usually you would get one of the other, either the owner or the manager, general manager. We saw neither of that. It's not particularly surprising with Mickey in that he's historically not wanted to become. He's always said to me, during the season, I'm in the background. That's the time the head coach and the quarterback are the face of the organization. Then after the season, that's when I step out. So it's not surprising in that regard, and it was mid-season. But when you make a change, you would expect it. And I think there's certainly a disappointment for him. And then I think the other factor in that is that he did not have a particularly good reaction after the season when he had the, of course, gum chewing incident with some of the fans. And I think there was a little of that at play. Like, he's already somewhat of a polarizing figure within the fan base. Let's not get into that right now. Let's just kind of move forward in season.
Yeah, I can understand that, but then again, in the same breath, he said at the end of last season he was going to take more of an, and I'm using this, my words, not his. He would be more aggressive, be more involved in what was going on. Yeah,
and I think the phrase he uses, we have to be, comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
I haven't seen that. I didn't see that, Eric. I didn't. They made a few changes.
Right.
And they made some changes, I think, culturally with that in mind. But it didn't last. I think that we saw a lot of the same thing. This team was built, and I wrote this in my preseason predictions when I did the local media.
Yes.
I mean, I picked the team to go 6-11, and I didn't want to pick that, but I could see very clearly this is a very precarious situation. That this roster was kind of a house of cards, and if it had some adversity in certain spots, that this whole thing would come tumbling down. That was my fear, especially with the early schedule. And it's exactly what happened. Once they got some adversity, there wasn't a lot of strong leadership in the locker room or from the coaching staff, And that's where I think we saw this team splinter. And I've talked, Drew Brees the other night, if you saw him on Monday Night Football, he talked about strong teams, when adversity hits, come together, they galvanize. We've seen that in New Orleans in the past. That's what happened here.
Right.
So yes, they've had injuries, but you can withstand that if you've got good leadership and attention to detail and accountability and discipline. Those are the things that I've seen out on Airline Drive that have not, or have disappeared or slowly devolved since Sean Payton left.
And that's interesting comments, because again, one of the things that the fans were sold was, we have a culture, we have great leadership in the locker room, we have a team that can contend. And you saw, as you said, the erosion of again the continuity and within the locker room. Also, the situation with, again, the drop off from their first team to, again, once they started getting these injuries, how far again the drop-off was from the starters to the backups.
Yeah, their depth on this team is not very good compared to teams we've seen in the past. And a lot of that has to do with salary cap management over the years. They've had to make some very difficult decisions. They've not hit on some of the draft picks in the past. And I would also say this about the draft, and sometimes, I know Jeff Ireland and his staff are getting criticism because they're not seeing some of the same production out of their draft picks.
Right.
But a lot of that could also be on the coaching staff, or we've seen that in the past, right? I can remember John Stinchcomb was a high draft pick, was not producing for a number of years. Sean Payton comes in and he's a very productive starter, Pro Bowler. Alex Anzalone's gone to Detroit and been a very good player. People here thought he was a bust. So I think Zach Bond's a good example.
The league is littered with them.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
Saints
those were good.
Right.
The college scouting department here has identified good players. It's been the roster management since then that I think is called into question, how they've decided who to keep and who to move on from.
Jeff, again, great points on the New Orleans Saints. We're gonna take a break here, hear from our underwriters, and we're gonna come in first team out the block. When we come back, we'll be the Tulane Green Wave. So stick around.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, and also, again, contributor to Fox 8 is our guest. Tulane Green Wave, 8-2, 6-0, 16 straight conference wins, longest streak in the country. Destroyed Temple last week, 52-6. They're 25th in the coaches poll, 26th in the 25th in the AP, 26th in the coaches poll, and now 25th in the college football playoff poll, which is huge. This is a big game this week against Navy. They're at Navy. Navy 7-2. They're 5-1 in the conference, but they're undefeated at home. Man, Summerall has done an incredible job with this team. I know you've had conversations with him, you've had interviews with him. Just amazing what he's been able to do in such a short period of time. And I bring it up again because you and I talked about it before we came on the air today. The thing that really strikes me is, again, over 50 players in terms of the turnover in this roster, even still turning this roster over after spring, still bringing in players. And again, what we've seen in terms of, again, guys on the same page, the continuity, these guys playing as a team, and again, the quality of athlete he's brought in as well.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that team get better every week, and that's what you want to see from a coaching staff, from a leadership standpoint. I think it took John and his staff a little while, understandably so, early in the season to figure out personnel, who fit in the right spots, what they want to do schematically. especially on the defensive side of the ball. He even said, as he came out of spring, after the spring game, he didn't know what he had on defense. I mean, this is a former linebacker. I mean, that's his bailiwick, is the defensive side of the ball. I think he knew what he had offensively. We saw that early in the year. But defensively, they've gotten better and better and better, where they're really playing well on that side of the ball. And we also see him employing, I think, some different players in different positions. He's just been slowly tinkering and tweaking things, and I think that's the sign of a very good coach. Whoever they play the rest of the way is in for a handful, because they're playing well on both sides of the ball. We've seen them on special teams. We've seen them on defense. I think they lead the country in return touchdowns. They've got some players too. I mean, it's not like the cupboard's bare there. They're going to be good for a while now. The quarterback they hit on, Darian Mensah, is probably the best freshman quarterback in the country. They're going to have a hard time, I think, hanging on to him. That's a big challenge for them to keep the big programs away from him. But everything, I think, has to be positive right now on Willow Street. This is a big game. I've covered games in Annapolis. Unbelievable atmosphere, incredible little town. It's going to be special, and they're going to have to play well. It's going to be a big challenge because Navy has had a tremendous year. They've hit a couple of speed bumps, but they're very talented, well-coached team. It should be a great game.
This is one of those games, again, whenever you play the service academies, where, again, discipline, gap discipline, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is huge for this team. Yeah,
and I like the way Tulane's playing defensively right now. I think they've got a really big shot to win this game just because of how well they're playing in the run game defensively. Early in the year, they weren't getting a lot of production out of the front seven. Pass rush in particular was a little shaky, and they've slowly dialed that down. They've got really good linebacker play. Howard's a big-time player, linebacker, and their secondaries come around to where they're deep there. They've got some depth on that side of the ball. And I think as long as Mensah can avoid some of those back-breaking mistakes, some of those rookie mistakes he's making early in the year, we saw occur in the Kansas State game, they should be able to run the ball with Mekhi Hughes, who's just had a tremendous season. The offensive line has also been an area that's improved as the year's gone on. I like their chances in this game, and then they come back home with some real momentum where they get Memphis.
Right, that's Memphis on Thanksgiving night. Navy has ECU and Army left. Again, when you look at Army, which is again in the mix here now for the American Athletic Conference Championship, they are 9-0. Again, they're 7-0 in the conference. They got Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium, Texas San Antonio, and then at Navy. But the situation is now, again, that game, Army-Navy, is at the American Athletic Conference Championship, so it has no bearing on that whatsoever. So it'll be interesting to see again what happens here. Again, you could say maybe again they might lose to Notre Dame. Again, that doesn't affect the standings when it comes to the American Athletic Conference. If they both end up with undefeated records, the question is again, is Tulane traveling to Army or is Army traveling to Tulane?
Right. I don't think we're going to find out.
We don't know yet, right?
I mean, I think a lot depends on how well Army plays Notre Dame too, as far as the college football playoff standings and everything. Right. But I think it's going to be
because it's the highest ranked team that is going to get the opportunity to be able to host.
Exactly. So I think that's a big. They have to play them well, and I think Notre Dame's playing very well right now. I've said this before. No one is talking about Notre Dame nationally. I think they're very much a contender to win the whole thing. I know they had that slip up earlier in the year against Northern Iowa. That was a total fluke game. That's a very good football team, and I think they're going to have trouble beating Notre Dame. But having said that, regardless, it's out of Tulane's hands. They win their games, they still might get left out.
Right.
And that's a shame because once they get into the bowl tie-ins, they could be playing kind of a second-rate bowl game because of the conference tie-ins. And this team's good enough. We were talking before we went on there. I'd love to see them play LSU in a bowl game.
That would be incredible.
Incredible matchup. I think it would be a very good game, but I don't think it's going to happen because of the tie-ins.
Let's talk about, again, the team that really is in front of them, if they are to run the table here, and that's Boise State. At San Jose, at Wyoming, Oregon State at home to finish out their 13th in the college football poll this week. Your thoughts there on Boise? Your thoughts on Boise maybe stumbling?
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I've watched them play. They're very good. Anything can happen. They had a little bit of a scare last week, but they're very talented, very well coached. I think they're going to end up getting that bowl tie-in. Even if they stumble one game, I think it's still up in the air because of Tulane having 2 losses. But so I would count on Boise winning out, getting the one Group of 5 berth. And Tulane's going to have to just take care of business, not worry about that. I don't sense that they're school board watching it all out there. I think they're playing at such a high level right now, and they know that if they just take care of their own business, they'll at least be in the mix. But that's first priority, taking care of your own business. But Boise State's got that running back, Genty, who's going to be a first-round draft pick. He would look good, by the way, in black and gold.
Yes,
he's a very good player. But I don't see them stumbling with that schedule. I mean, Oregon State's not exactly a power right now.
Yeah, right. When you look at this Tulane team, the one thing I see from the Fritz era to now with Summerall is sustainability. This looks like it's going to be a program that from this point forward, again, is going to be not just an American Athletic Conference top team, but again, a team that again, will probably be in the mix for the next few years if Summerall stays.
Yeah, look, if you're John Summerall, and he's going to have a lot of suitors. I mean, he's a very well-respected coach across the country. You have to make a decision on where can you be successful, and there's a lot of things going right now if you're at Tulane in that the new college expanded playoff. You could argue you could have a better chance of getting in the college football playoff at Tulane than, say, Kentucky, which is his alma mater. It's already been linked to Kentucky. But if you're John Summerall, do you want to go to Kentucky and have to fight that bear in the SEC with the resource disadvantage you would have against your peers, or be at an advantage at Tulane with your peers where you're at? I think that's a very difficult decision. Certainly money is going to be involved. I think guys like Summerall are wired to compete, but I don't think it's the slam dunk that everybody thinks it is, that he would just immediately jump to a bigger program. It's going to have to be the right one. It's going to have to be one where I think he can be successful at, and I'm not sure one of the lower level big programs is the way to go, because I think in the future, those programs, the Mississippi States of the world, they're up against it. Kansas, I mean, who's going to go to Kansas? I mean, you're never going to get in the lower level Big Ten. You're never going to really have a realistic shot, I think, of playing in the college football playoff. Here I'm saying that, and Indiana's number 5 right now. But I think it more often than not, it's going to be difficult to do. And you're proven here, he really has a very strong eye for talent and personnel as a head coach. That's very rare. We were talking earlier in the program about how after the spring game he came out, he found 5 starting players after the spring game that he went out and found at other programs through the transfer portal and plugged them in. That's hard to do. He hasn't missed on any of them. So I think the future's in good hands. They're going to have to replace some things next year, defensive line in particular. They got some defensive guys, but the success he showed in doing that, in personnel-wise, and the fact that he's kind of got it rolling here, I think he's going to be very attractive for transfer portal options. You
mentioned a story to me before we came on today about, again, one of your colleagues talked about Summerall and the type of coach he is. Would you mind explaining that?
I just think, I have colleagues all over the country in different lines of work, and they're wired in, a couple of them on the college scene, and they've very, very favorable impression of John Summerall. I think they think he's a generational type talent, a guy that can come in, not only be a program changer here, but program changer anywhere he goes. We saw that with Willie Fritz. Willie Fritz, a track record of winning. Brian Kelly's that kind of guy, right? Brian Kelly, look at his track record, his resume. He won everywhere he's gone. And I think Summerall is going to be that way. He won at Troy, he's winning here. And if he does move on, he's going to win. I mean, he's just one of these guys that kind of gets it. He's got the big picture vision for how a program needs to be run. And look, there's a lot of things that Tulane needs to do, make a decision institutionally if they want to be a player at the level that maybe they need to be. But I think the last few years there's certainly been a little more momentum in that direction than there was a decade ago. Right.
Well, look, I know what you're getting. They have to upgrade their facilities. They're going to have to give Summerall what they didn't give Fritz. Or Summerall, again, will, even if he wants to stay in New Orleans, as it seems like he loves New Orleans, he will vote for a better opportunity. Because, again, it's an arms race in college football.
Well, yeah, and I know a lot of people talking about the indoor practice facility, things like that. Yeah, you have to get to that, especially in the climate that we have here. They've all constantly in like a wild goose chase of where are they going to play or practice that morning, because they practice early. And they're constantly monitoring the weather, and they Can they get in the Saints facility? Well, that facility has always been open to them, but they're having construction out there right now. Then they have to go to the Dome, and there's all kinds of, there's just a lot of complications. The school with the resources that Tulane has, and I know there's limited land. I get that. I know that's always been a big hurdle for them. But I think at some point you got to make a tough decision and build this thing. That's not the only thing they need to do, but it's certainly something that should have been done long before now. Before
we move off from Tulane, I made this comment to you before we started. It's kind of a shame, but it is the way it is, because you're always going to play again these Power 4 teams early in the season. But you know, Tulane has such a turnover in that if those games against Kansas State and Oklahoma, in my opinion, were a little bit later on in the season, might have saw different outcomes.
Yeah, if you played those games now, I think Tulane would win both of them.
I agree.
And they should have won the Kansas State game. I covered that game, and they outplayed K-State the whole game, and just unfortunately had some bad breaks right at the very end and couldn't overcome it. But they're playing so well right now on both sides of the ball. Look, I covered the game down at Louisiana and Lafayette. Louisiana, they're a very good team.
Yeah, yes.
And they won that game pretty decisively, and I don't think they've lost since then, if I'm correct. So it's been actually a very good year for football in this state.
Yes, it has.
I mean, ULM's had a very good year with their new coach. It's been one of the better years we've seen outside of the Tulane-LSU axis.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's talk a little Alabama-LSU, unfortunately. Alabama 42, LSU 13. LSU's now 6-3, 3-2 in the SEC. They're at Florida this week, 21st in the AP, 22nd in the coaches, and then 22nd in the college football playoff as well. Last six quarters have really been bad football for LSU. Kelly again getting a lot of grief right now from the fans based on again the inability to stop the running quarterback, having 2 weeks to prepare for Milroe, especially after what happened last year. A lot of frustration in Tigerland right now.
Yeah, it's funny because the whole build up to the game, if you watched College Game Day, they interviewed Brian Kelly. That's all they talked about was game planning to stop Jalen Milroe in the running game. He said it's been the point of emphasis, and they just sometimes you just can't do it though too. I mean, sometimes great players overcome it, and I felt like that game he played one of his best games that he's been at Alabama. I think clearly they have an issue defensively still. The personnel isn't quite up to where they need to be. He's going to have to bolster that side of the ball in the transfer portal. I know they've had a great recruiting year. This is the first time I've seen really Brian Kelly in his tenure there where they've had some late season stumbles. Whereas in the past, you've seen them kind of get better as the year goes on. This year, they've kind of had, and look, this is no gimme game they've got against Florida. I mean, they traditionally have a little bit of a letdown after playing Bama because it's such an emotional buildup. They've got to come prepared to play. And like, I think they've also got a little problem running the ball. That's been an issue with this offensive line. That's, a veteran offensive line. It's a group that has a lot of talent, but that's the foundation that they want to build offensively, and they haven't been able to do that as well. They just got thoroughly outplayed in that game by Alabama. It was from the very start. Alabama took the kickoff, went right down the field, scored a touchdown, and kind of dominated that game. But you got to bring it every week in the SEC, and that A&M game. Once that game tipped with the quarterback change, that momentum change, this team hasn't really recovered from that.
Yeah. To me, biggest disappointment this season has been the play of the offensive line. Especially with all the hype we heard, this is going to be the best offensive line in the country. 2 first-round picks at tackles. The interior of the offensive line has not been able to get a push in terms of the running game. Again, all year long, you look at the inability to run the football. And again, I think the genesis of what we've seen on offense, the issues that they have had down the stretch here, is because of, the lack of living up to maybe the press clippings of the offensive line.
Yeah, I would say this. I think sometimes we're guilty of, raised false expectations. I've talked to scouts, NFL scouts, that don't think either one of those guys is a first-round draft pick.
Okay.
Either one.
Okay.
So we'll see. I think sometimes it could be overhyped. I think Campbell will end up probably being a first-round pick, but I know some teams in the league don't even have him in the second round.
Okay.
So maybe what we're seeing here is they're not as good as we thought.
Maybe they need to come back for another year.
Yeah. I'm just saying. I think and Emory Jones right now is more of a third-round grade than first round. So you got to produce. You got to play, especially in the SEC. I thought we saw that a little bit against A&M, which is loaded with high draft picks on the defensive line. I thought A&M outplayed them up front. That's been the disappointment, no question, offensively. They've had to rely too much on Nussmeier to play hero ball in the passing game, and we've seen that that's been mixed results.
Well, again, the last 6 quarters, again, 5 turnovers in the last 6 quarters have really doomed this team and put them in a bad position. In some cases, again, I'm not putting it on Nussmeier, okay, but again, we thought that, at least a lot of myself and a lot of people thought that, again, that he had gotten past maybe that gunslinger mentality, but again, as things have broken down, he's reverted back to it. And I compared him on the radio show a lot to Jameis Winston.
Yeah, so he's like.
I mean, they seem to mirror each other. Again, when Jameis comes to New Orleans, he's under Peyton. It was a little bit more constricted. He stayed within the box. Then, of course, eventually he comes out. He becomes Jameis, right? The same thing with Nussmeier. All year long, looks like that he's kind of got it under control. That he's, but then again, when things start to break down, gets back in that gunslinger mode, and it's kind of backfired on him. Yeah,
and you see this traditionally with quarterbacks with really strong arms, that have strong arm talent. They fall into the trap of thinking they're going to always fit the ball in because they have that power arm, whereas quarterbacks, maybe sometimes like a Drew Brees, that aren't blessed with this cannon of an arm, are a little more judicious in their decision making, and I think sometimes you can get guilty of that when you've got arm talent like Nussmeier has. And I think the running game really has dropped off, and that's kind of led to that, too much emphasis on passing.
Is the running game, in your opinion, personnel, or is it a combination of personnel and the offensive line not being able to open up holes for the game?
Yeah, I think a little both.
Both?
Yeah, I don't think they've got an elite running back either. An elite level running back, and the offensive line just has not been there. I mean, there's some games where you just don't see anywhere to go. And that should not be happening, I think, for a team that is talented up front and experienced up front. I mean, these guys are all coming back, so it's been disappointing.
A lot of frustration, again, with LSU now, with the fan base. I look at it and I say, look, the coaching staff is the coaching staff. Maybe there's some changes in the coaching staff at the end of the season with Kelly. He's a little bit I don't see he's on a hot seat. The seat's a little bit warm there. But there's got to be an upgrade in the roster. The SEC is eating their own every week, and in order to compete, you've got to get the top players. And LSU has to upgrade the type of players they're bringing in. That's been pretty evident over these last few weeks once they got in SEC play.
Yeah, I saw his comment the other day, though. It might have been on my social media timeline where we were comparing. His actual record, his first 3 years, is better than what Nick Saban had in his first 3 years.
Right.
And the comment was, well, Nick Saban inherited a much worse situation. I'm not sure that's accurate. I don't think people realize this, or maybe they're forgetting conveniently how bad the program was.
That's right.
I mean, I think they had 39 scholarship players.
Right. Everybody bolted after
at the end of Ed Orgeron. I mean, I remember that bowl game was against TCU. It was ugly. So the cupboard was very bare.
Yes.
And I think that has to be recognized. I mean, when you're bringing in FCS players to start in your secondary, you're in trouble in the SEC.
That's right.
And I think that's bared out. We've seen it's just not the level it needs to be, and I think Brian Kelly is a good recruiter. They're recruiting at a high level, but this is a whole changing landscape right now, shifting landscape in college football, figuring out the transfer portal, figuring out roster management. All those things are going on. It's a dynamic time, and I know Scott Woodward, as the athletic director, is heavily involved in that. They're trying to figure out, I mean, it's basically pro football now.
Yeah, it is.
You are managing a salary cap, you're managing your roster, you're going to manage the transfer portal. There's just a lot of things going on that I think Brian Kelly's having to navigate that Nick Saban didn't have to when he came in.
No doubt. Let's talk Pelicans 3-8. They play, as we're recording this program, they play Oklahoma City tonight. Look, much like the Saints, injuries. I mean, when you've got Murray, C.J. Herb, Zion, Hawkins, now Alvarado goes out. Again, you get Murphy back. Again, they just don't. They don't have the players right now, no matter what. Now, you can make a comment on, again, maybe you don't like what Willie Green's scheme is. You don't like, again, the way it's being coached. But it's very, very difficult to win games when you don't have a roster of players to win games with.
Yeah, like the game the other night was very disappointing against the Nets because that was winnable.
Absolutely.
You had the game in hand, and then the ugly head of not being able to finish, not being able to execute. The problem I've got, my good friend Joel Myers, the play-by-play announcer, you hear him every game. He's such a knowledgeable NBA analyst. they're starting these possessions with 10 seconds on the clock, 8 seconds. I realized DeJounte Murray was brought in to be the lead guard to help in that area, but you still have veteran players out there, Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram. They're not necessarily lead guard facilitators, but they have to be more, there has to be a greater sense of urgency at the end of the game. The quality of the shots that they got down the stretch, that's why they were 0 for 8.
Right.
Because they were getting terrible shots. That's on the coach, it's on those veteran players, has nothing to do with injuries. So that was a winnable game you let slip away. You can't afford that. Now you're playing teams where you have no chance, really.
It is a bear of a schedule.
I think they're 14.5-point underdogs tonight against the OKC Thunder. You could play very well and lose that game. So you have to get those wins like that when you have a chance. So to me, that's the problem right now, is it's a combination of personnel, obviously the injuries, but also there's something missing there. There's something missing in the execution level and the buy-in that I'm not seeing manifest itself. When you have this limited a roster, everyone's got to play with incredible effort and energy. I don't see that. They've got to overachieve, and right now I don't see it on the defensive end either.
I'm putting on against the clock here with only about a minute and a half left. Buy-in. Is this a situation where maybe this team is tuning out their head coach?
Well, I mean, look, I think the frustration of not winning certainly plays into this, but excuse me, I just don't see. Willie Green came in with the reputation of being a very good emphasis on defense. Right. I don't see this team as any dominant defensive team. Their numbers are down to the bottom of the league. I know it'd help to have your starters. Right. I get it. But there's just a lot of things I think going wrong right now. And when you haven't had success in the past, there tends to be this here we go again mentality. And I think it infects the whole basketball operation. And the worst thing that's happened for the Pels right now is the fact you had a chance, especially with the Saints being down, you had a chance really to get the casual fan on board. Right. There are always, the fence sitters out there. And with the Saints being down, man, they had a chance, I think, to capture a lot of the fans here. And they've squandered that, with this injury spree. It's been really unfortunate. And look, I put that out the other day. I know we're getting ready to get off here, but look at the last 10 years, how they've started. They haven't had a winning season after 10 games. That tweet, that's impossible to overcome, trying to get fans to have some enthusiasm. Always digging yourself out of a hole. Yeah, you're always behind the 8 ball. No one's going to get excited about that.
Now, and they have some flaws on this team as well. I still believe, again, as well as Misi has played, again, they still need a legitimate center. We'll see again how this team plays. Again, once again the starters come back, the perimeter defense has been horrible. Again, teams are getting into the paint too easy. Well, maybe when Murray and Herb come back, you'll see maybe that cut down a little bit. But again, right now, this team doesn't have the talent to win consistently. I'll be interested to see again if they get healthy, if they can make a little bit of a run here, or if it's right now it looks like play-in tournament at best.
Right. I think you or I could get to the rack on this team right now.
Yeah, I think so.
The perimeter defense is terrible.
It's horrible, no doubt. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Sure. Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Times-Picayune, also again contributor to Fox 8, and of course great author as well. The name of the book one more time?
Life Impossible, Steve Gleason.
Make sure you guys pick it up. All right, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, so many ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen that will take you to my website, ericasher.com, and also the WLAE-TV YouTube channel. Remember also, we don't have a 1 o'clock showing. We're going to have a 9 o'clock showing every Saturday now, 9 a.m. every Saturday on WLAE-TV. Catch me on the radio, 106.1 The Ticket. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the 106.1 The Ticket app, iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, other digital platforms you can catch the show and the station on. Also, Anchor, Spotify. We're on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. I want to thank the underwriters who make this show possible. Each and every one of those underwriters, we thank them. Again, without them, there would be no show, so we appreciate them. And we appreciate the production staff here at WLAE-TV who do a fantastic job on our show each and every week. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Alex Chacon, and the best director in the business, William Hill. For Jeff Duncan, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.